Mr. Ambassador, the Prime Minister of Pakistan is going to have talks with President Clinton. What do you think the two leaders are likely to discuss?
Well, I think there are a number of subjects that are likely to come up. First, of course, is the state of U.S.-Pakistan relations in light of the Pakistan nuclear tests. Then there will be the consequences of the sanctions that the U.S. imposed and now has partially lifted. And then there are some old issues that are still around. The question of the F-16s. Pakistan would like to be paid for or get their airplanes. And then, of course, there's the issue that's been around almost since the beginning of Pakistan, Kashmir. And one expects that that almost inevitably come up India and Pakistan.
Pakistan has traditionally been a key ally or partner of the United States. What do you think were the irritants which caused some sort of strain on their bilateral relationship in the recent past?
Pakistan was an ally of the United States in the 1950s and the 1960s. That alliance broke up in the 1960s. Then in the 1980s, the United States and Pakistan got together, not really as allies, but as partners, partners in the war in Afghanistan. And when that war was over, the partnership broke up. And the issue on which the partnership broke up is really the issue that's still around, that is Pakistan's nuclear program, which was given a lower priority during the 1980s, and then in the 1990s it came forward. And as you know, because of the Pressler Amendment, the United States concluded that it was legally bound to that existed all through the 1990s.
What are the key issues in U.S.-Pakistan relations?
Well, I think pretty clearly the key issue that overriding everything else right now is the nuclear question. And that has been the key issue for 20 years now, when you come right down to it. And this is very unfortunate because it should not be the key issue. The key issue should be economic cooperation, things which each side can do to benefit each other, rather than things which in the last analysis each side does that are in one way or the other harmful to each other. I think this is very sad. I think it's been a sad chapter in our relationship these last 20 years.
What is your view, Professor?
Well, I think it depends which side you're looking at this relationship from. Certainly from the American government's point of view, the Clinton administration, the nuclear issue is a major irritant. I think that the United States has a global nuclear posture in which we are making no effort to lead the world toward the reduction and elimination of nuclear weapons. Therefore, I think our policy toward South Asia is very unrealistic and won't be effective, because I think that in order for India and Pakistan to move toward the reduction of their own, for the India and Pakistan to take the necessary steps to avoid the deployment of nuclear weapons, the steps that would lead to a nuclear arms race, the United States also must take steps at the global level so that the whole world is moving toward the reduction and elimination of nuclear weapons. So I think the American government regards what Pakistan and India have done as a major irritant in the relationship with both countries, and not only an irritant in many areas. In the case of Pakistan, the U.S., fearing economic implosion, has resolved the problems of the IMF and immediate economic assistance. But this nuclear irritant is certainly, from the American point of view, American government point of view, very important, and all of us hope that the India and Pakistan will not embark on a nuclear arms race, but I think it's appropriate for Pakistan to point out that the U.S. has a role in this process too. I think that from Pakistan's point of view, the F-16 issue is a major irritant. And I think that although I was for many years a leading critic of the U.S. policy of military aid to Pakistan, my sympathies are with your government, with the Pakistan government, on this issue, because the United States led Pakistan to think that it could allocate this money and place these orders, and question of the relationship on nuclear issues. We've gotten into a mess now where Pakistan certainly should be able to recover the money that it has laid out. And I think that's going to be very difficult to resolve in political terms, in terms of the U.S. Congress. I can't really see a way out, even though I think there should be a way out, and I hope that Nawaz Sharif can persuade President Clinton to take some extraordinary action to rectify this unjust aspect of the relationship. I think that from the American point of view, I wouldn't call it an irritant, but I think that the question of economic management in Pakistan is very important. And I think all students of Pakistan in this country agree that there's a need for a tighter economic management, more fiscal discipline. There's general agreement that economic management has to be more disciplined, and or it's going to make it very difficult for the U.S. to continue approval of an IMF bailout for Pakistan. I don't think that type of support will go on indefinitely unless there's a feeling of a tighter ship economically. And so I would say that although on Kashmir, although Pakistan considers this a major irritant, the fact that the U.S. is not taking any leadership on the Kashmir issue, this is really, I don't think the U.S. is in a position to be a very effective, of much help in resolving this problem. We have so alienated India, first with military aid to Pakistan. Even the way we handled the IMF issue just recently has made it look like we're being nicer to Pakistan than to India. We're in no position to be a mediator, and I think that we probably would do more harm than good if we got involved. Between Pakistan and the United States, all can be eased if we look at this in terms of, if both sides look at the way the other perceives the relationship and take steps to deal with these problems in a more equitable way. And certainly, we're not going to get anywhere on nuclear issues with Pakistan or with India unless the United States takes leadership at the global level and shows that it too is willing to reduce its own nuclear weapons and move the whole world, lead the whole world toward a shared, collective effort.
What's your view, Doctor?
Well, let me say a couple of things. I have never been of the opinion that we should go around telling the world what their security solutions are. So I'm not too in sympathy with my government about that. I think that the Pakistanis of the world, but you have the primary interest in your security just as we have the primary interest in our security. I once told the Indians, I said, okay, I give you that you need the nuclears, but then you must give me that we need them too. So I think that if we try to see it from the other person's side, that we'll make a little more progress. But there are true believers, what I call true believers in this city, who believe that nuclear non-proliferation is the only issue in the world. I'm not one of those either. So I think there are a number of other issues that we could and should discuss and not let this dominate. So that's my personal opinion.
There is a general perception that Pakistan has been discriminated against. What's your view, and how this impression can be dispelled?
I don't think Pakistan is being discriminated to be even-handed in terms of its application. It just so happened that because Pakistan did certain things with respect to its nuclear program, that American law was triggered in a way which caused sanctions to be visited upon Pakistan. But even in the most recent case, because of the nuclear explosions, you notice that American law was equally applied to both India and Pakistan, and so I believe that the reason that there is a feeling of discrimination is because there have been certain, for various domestic political reasons, the idea of discrimination against Pakistan has been raised within Pakistani domestic politics, and that's probably the main reason for it.
Keeping the nuclear issue apart, what other aspects of bilateral relations can be further improved?
Well, I think that economic relations with the United States certainly is an area which could engage in business with Pakistani companies and to invest in Pakistan. But that will only be the case if there is a feeling of stability.
Do you see any change in the outlook or approach of the Clinton administration?
Well, I think there has been a change over the years, really, under the Clinton administration from the Bush administration. There was an effort, successful effort in 1995 to water down the Pressler Amendment through the Brown Amendment so that economic aid and some of the other forms of assistance could be resumed. It wasn't as successful as it might have been, and indeed new irritants have come up in that period. Irritants over the drug program, the drug problem in Pakistan, which required the United States to actually issue, I think, waivers in the last over Afghanistan that have developed, even though we were together during the war to oust the communists. Of late, there's been trouble over the Taliban. So I think there are a whole series of problems that are there to be discussed.
What can be the parameters of a more durable, more dependable relationship between the two countries?
Well, I think you have to, absent broad consensus on goals and broad common interests, which I think are not there the way they were during the Cold War, certainly not there the way they were during the war in Afghanistan. You have to tackle it problem by problem, and you have to just deal with them one by one in the hope that you can, by clearing away the problems, end up with what I would call a normal relationship, which isn't going to be, I think, the sort of relationship that a lot of Pakistanis would like back to the 1990s aid. I think to hope for that, it's really unrealistic. But I think that one can hope for a more normal, a more reasonable relationship than we've had in some of the past few years.
Professor, South Asia is the area of special interest to you. With the emergence of new realities in the region, like the nuclear potential and capabilities, what is your perception of the security situation in the region?
Well, it's a lot more dangerous than it was a year ago or 6 months ago. Nuclear weapons are nasty things. I'm not one that thinks that either India or Pakistan is going to be irresponsible in handling nuclear weapons. I think that one can have a considerable amount of faith in both countries. They're neither suicidal nor ignorant. In this case, or in that sense, I'm not that very wrong indeed. Clearly, though, nuclear weapons are a symptom, not a cause, a symptom of a competition that really needs to be dealt with at some fundamental level by the two sides involved. Very hard for an outsider to say how to do that.
Kashmir being the flashpoint, would it be realistic to presume or to consider that an environment of peace and security can be created in the region without resolving this issue?
Well, the United States over the years, and if you go back through the history, as I've been doing and writing, as I'm now writing a history of U.S.-Pakistan relations, has tried very hard, particularly in the early years, to get some sort of a settlement between India and Pakistan on the Kashmir issue. It was not successful. The issue itself, which is often forgotten now, through much of the 70s and much of the 1980s, was a back burner issue. And the reason it's become an issue, of course, is I think India's shortcomings in the management of the valley, the intifada that developed there. I think that the United States would like this to be resolved. It's always wanted it to be resolved. But I don't see that the United States can play, even if it wished to play. And I think if it saw a possibility for an effective role, it would play that role. But I don't think it sees that possibility now.
Thank you, gentlemen. We had a good discussion. Thank you. You spared your time for our viewers.